First, I felt very intimidated being on a panel about veterans. I thought, what do I have to offer? Concrete Couch asked me about 6 months back, would I do a project with the veterans? And we started working on a storytelling project. And I was in the same boat. I was like, I don't know anything about veterans. I don't belong doing this. And I've come to learn that knowing veterans and saying I know veterans is like saying I know the human race. You can't. Each one is very, very different, and each person has their own story to tell. And in fact, it wasn't until I sat down with one of the veterans that he pointed out to me, because he knows my family, that I come from a family of veterans. But I never considered my parents veterans. They didn't meet my image or my picture of what a veteran was. Maybe because they never saw war, maybe because they don't talk about it. I just thought, well, they're not real veterans. And I've been told time and time again by the veterans that it doesn't matter if a veteran has seen battle or not. They were all doing what they needed to do to take care of the country. And they were all part of that team. And I realized my mother joined the Navy. And she was asked to be, she said, I'll do anything but work at a desk. So they gave her a job working at a desk. And then later they gave her a promotion to cleaning the latrines and cleaning the offices. And she did that. And then later she taught sailors how to swim. And she told me a story about when she forgot her nylons for deck inspection, and she had to draw a marker line on her leg to look like she had her stockings on. And the officer came by and inspected, and she passed the inspection. And so you hear stories like that. And then I interviewed my brother-in-law, Tom Donatelli, who fought in World War II, who told me the story of being stuck on Starvation Ridge, fighting the Japanese, and they were surrounded, and they ate nothing but grass for 27 days. And they had to dig holes to keep their heads in so their heads wouldn't be shot. And at night, those holes would fill with water because of the storms, and they would have to pick up their heads and just breathe to the side and put their heads back in the water. And he said at night they kept so still that if anything moved, they shot at it. Whether it was a water buffalo or a child, it didn't matter, they shot. And they eventually put phosphorus leaves on the back of their neck and belly crawled down to the bottom in hopes of rescue, which didn't come. Well, Tom is 88 this year, and he still goes to post-traumatic stress disorder counseling once a week at 88 years old from World War II. So everybody's story was so different. The project last night, 4 of the veterans were telling stories, and each story was so diverse and so compelling. And some, when telling their stories, they had to take a break and cry for a minute to get the words out. And all of them said, I didn't know if I could do this. I didn't know if I could do this. And it brought up so much stuff. And other veterans were, one told a story about being in Vietnam and being stung by a wasp, and he thought he was shot. He fell down, he said, I'm shot. And people were saying, there's no blood, you're okay. And brought him in, and he told stories about giant snakes and about travel. And everybody's story was different. And after, we had a question and answer session, and every vet approached it differently. From one veteran saying, I'm so with the protesters. You've got to understand that because I'm in a war doesn't mean I'm not a protester of war. You know, I'm not the war. I'm just doing what I know how to do because I've been asked to do it. To another one who had problems with protesters and was really angry about it. One who's been helped so much by the VA, he said he couldn't live without the VA. And another who felt like he was just given drugs and drugs upon drugs to sedate himself, and he couldn't get the help that he needed from the VA. But what was magical is that they all listened to each other's stories. There's a doctor named Dr. Edward Tick who writes a book called War in the Soul. And he said, in America, so many of our veterans come back lost and alone and confused. Because in the war, they're taken young, they're shaved, they're reclothed, they're renamed, they're redressed, they're retrained to think that their individual life doesn't matter, that it's the community as a whole that matters. And they're sent to war, and when they come back, they're alone. And how other cultures outside of the United States, the same shaman and the same leaders who send their warriors off to war are the same leaders and the same shaman and the same community that welcome their warriors back home. And when they come back home, the community circles them and embraces them. And they have rites of passage, and they have ceremonies, and they have rituals. One such ritual is storytelling, to help that veteran know, to help that warrior know he's not alone. He's come back for the same community he's fought for, and the community is there to listen to what happened and how we're missing that. If I had not worked with these vets for the last 6 months, I wouldn't be here, and I certainly wouldn't come to a veteran storytelling, because I would think a veteran was far different from me. And what I've learned is that these veterans, what matters is not veteran to civilian, but human being to human being. That audience was listening to stories last night, and they could identify with laughing. They could identify with being terrified. And they were appalled to hear what some of the things those people went through, and their hearts went out. And these veterans felt that they were being heard and supported, and often for the first time. And I think if people understood it's human being to human being, people doing their best for other people, without this gap between veteran and civilian, I think all these chairs would be filled. And it breaks my heart that there's such a gap when it's about all of us.